What was it like being a New York City police officer on 9/11? Today, you'll find out on Equal Matters. The Equal Matters intro created by the amazingly talented Cal the Guitar Hero, lead guitarist with the Color 8 Band. Hi, my name is Rob Hunter. Over 20 years ago, I met Rob Coppola on a cruise. I know. It was 1 year after 9/11, and even now, those memories and images are still fresh in his mind. He's been courageous enough to share some of that experience with you today. Additionally, you'll learn about the second half of Rob's career and how it really changed after 9/11. When he first became a cop, he thought he might stay with the NYPD for 25, maybe even 30 years. But that Tuesday morning in September 2001, well, it changed all of that. Rob came up with a plan on how to retire after 20 years on the job, a plan he successfully implemented, a plan that he walks you through today. The plan came with sacrifices, as they all do. It serves as a master class in what you can accomplish if you come up with a strategy. Thanks for being here as you get firsthand experiences of a New York City police officer. My friend, my brother from another, Rob Coppola.
Before we get to, it was probably the biggest day of anyone in the NYPD's career, if you were on the force in 2001, 9/11, of course, we didn't have time in the last 2-hour conversation to go over the fact that when you were in the NYPD, you were also a bicycle cop.
I was actually in the first training class of the NYPD bicycle unit.
What was it? Was it a unit of how many people?
Well, it ended up being a pretty big unit in each precinct, but at the time there was only 2 of us in each precinct. And the training session was a week, which was way too long because I guess they didn't think it out. And shocking. But there was probably a good, 40, 50 guys there from all over the city.
So different precincts come to the same place for the 1-week training.
Right. So, I mean, the 79 precincts or whatever it was. But there was probably only 28 maybe that were there that week, 25, and 2 from every precinct. So, I mean, the training was actually fun, but they didn't think it out. Like, there was a lot of downtime of us just sitting around, not doing much. But the actual training was pretty interesting, what they made us do on the bikes.
What did they make
it was
you
fun. They make you, like, ride the bike really fast and then, like, jump to one side and jump off of it. Like
you're on chips or something?
Right. And then, like, they make you do this exercise where you think that you're going to be riding the bike and there's going to be, like, something on the ground, like a gun or something. And they want you to not get off the bicycle and try to pick it up while you're riding it, which is kind of interesting. So, like, you have to bend down all the way to one side.
Polo.
Yeah, and you have to, like, reach all the way down to the ground and pick up, like, a bottle that's on its side. That was kind of, I mean, the training itself was interesting, and just like every other training that you do where there's physicality involved, people wipe out, so it's always the greatest thing, watching people get hurt and fall. So
why did you join the bicycle unit?
Because I worked in an office at the time with the training officer, and the training came down, and me and my partner Steve just happened to be. I was in the office, and Steve just happened to be malingering in the office like he always did, and he came down and he's like, we need 2 guys to go to bike training. We're like, we'll go, and they didn't want to give it to us because like I had a desk job, and I think Steve was in charge of like school crossing guards, just some ridiculous thing. And they're like, you guys aren't going to use this. We're like, of course we'll use it. I mean, if we have it, of course we'll use it. Yeah. So we kind of made the guys send us because it didn't even get out to the precinct. Like it didn't even get out to, like they didn't even put it out there. Like, we need 2 guys for bike training. No, as soon as it came down, we saw it and we took it, because we just figured it was going to be a week out of the office, a week out of the precinct. We can just go somewhere else where you don't have to drive to the office every day.
Yeah. Was the training, where did they do the training? Because you were based in Brooklyn, just to kind of reset. You were an NYPD officer based in Brooklyn.
Right. So the training was, there's 2, I think at the time, there was 2 drivers training locations in the city. And the one in Brooklyn also had the aviation unit stationed out of there. So all the drivers training went out of there, and the aviation unit worked out of there. And it was probably a further drive from where we worked, but we weren't working. Like we weren't going to the office.
Right, exactly. You didn't have to go arrest bad guys, do your desk job.
Yeah, it was just like a little
handle crossing
vacation. It was a
guards.
vacation for a week.
Yeah.
So the whole city had to send their people to these two places. So obviously, I think the other one was in the Bronx. So it didn't make any chance for us to. It didn't make any sense to go out to the Bronx. So of course we did it in Brooklyn. So.
And what did you do? So you go through the training. You are out with your badge on, riding a bike.
Yeah, well, you buff out, you buy all the dopey bike pants and just dopey polo shirts that they wore and gloves, and the bike helmet. You just looked like a total nerd.
Very threatening, New York City police officer.
Yeah, but the best part was the greatest thing about it was that no one knew we were cops. Like no one expected to see cops on a bicycle because it never happened before, right? So. When we came out of that training class, there was only 50 of us in the whole city that were riding bikes as cops. So no one knew we were cops, which was the greatest thing because here we are wearing polo shirts, and people just thought that we were just people on bikes.
You're like missionaries out
Right.
there delivering a message.
Yeah, I mean, how people didn't really notice that we had a gun belt on or anything. They just thought we were just regular people riding around, which was great because we could just do whatever we wanted.
So what do you do on? Is it a patrol? How does being a bicycle cop work?
Yeah.
You just like ride up and down the street.
Well, it's just basically like having a foot post, right? Except that now you're a little more mobile. So when you have a foot post, you're responsible for maybe 2 streets, 2 blocks. Now you're on a bike, you're responsible for a much wider area because you're going to get there faster. So because we knew they didn't know what to do with us, so they were just like, all right, just go out there, and if you hear a call, pick it up. And we're like, yeah, all right. So basically, we just did whatever we wanted, and we just went to like the locations where people were hanging out, taking the sun, just people watching. That's basically what we did. I mean, it does get boring 8 hours just driving around, or just sitting there. So I mean, if there was something close by, we would go to it, And there was a couple of times where we had to actually respond to things, which was cool because again, no one expected us to pull up on a bicycle.
So one of those stories. So how long did this whole bike cop
Just
thing
a
last?
summer.
Okay, so
It
it
was
was a
just-
summer experiment with the NYPD.
Right. It was just a summer, and then the next summer they expanded it, and then they actually made a unit in each precinct, which was like, I don't know, 8 cops and a sergeant maybe. And by that time, we were like, Steve and I were like, no, we're not doing this.
We tried it. We moving.
Yeah,
on.
we're fine. But there was a couple of times where we actually responded to jobs, but the best one was there was a robbery and that took place, and we were a few blocks away, so we were heading over there. And by the time we were getting close, the perp had split. He fled, and then they gave a description, and so we were kind of close, and we were just riding the bikes around. And we're driving down the street, and I'm with Steve, and I'm like, holy shit, that's him. And he's running down the street, and then he stops. He's kind of like walking fast because, he's trying to not bring any attention to himself. But he's looking back, and, he keeps looking back because he's going down the street, and the cars are coming behind him. So he keeps looking back to see if there's a car coming. And he's not paying any attention to me and Steve whatsoever because he doesn't expect to see 2 cops. And then he comes out into the street. He's still looking behind him, and he still doesn't even notice me and Steve. And I said, we had so much time. Like, we could have got off the bicycles and, like, put our arms around the guy and, like, maybe we were taking him for a beer because he had no idea who we were. But I said to Steve, watch this. So I rode on the bike. I threw my left leg over the bike. Both my feet are on the right pedal. I jumped off the bike like they taught us at the training, and I tackled him. The guy was scared shit because he didn't know who I was. He just thought I was some guy tackling him. It was like the easiest arrest we ever had because the guy just fell on the ground, and he was like, "What the hell?"
That's like being a ninja cop, a
Yeah.
stealth cop.
And of course, we just cuffed him, and the car came, took him away, and we got on our bikes, and we did it. We just kept riding our bikes.
Did you have to do any paperwork?
No, I didn't want it.
Yes, even better. That's a great enough reason to be a bike cop right there.
I didn't want the arrest. I was like, I don't care. Someone else take it. I don't care.
So you did a whole summer riding the bike. So what is that? June, July, August, basically? Maybe into September?
Yeah, it was probably up until Labor Day because Labor Day is when all the shit goes down in Brooklyn. So it was probably up until Labor Day, yeah. So yeah, it probably started just like everything with the NYPD. It probably started Memorial Day and ended on Labor Day.
So do you, looking back, think that the NYPD's bicycle unit was a good idea because of its mobility? Or was it
No,
Probably
I
not.
think basically just like everything else with the NYPD was community. Like they just wanted to interact with the community, right? I mean, just it still goes on this day, right? The cops hate the community, community hates the cops. So I think it was just another way for people to get out there. I mean, for us to get out there and have people see us and have us be visible. I don't think they really thought there'd be much enforcement out of it. I think it was more of omnipresence, like everything else,
Well, I mentioned the last time I went on a ride log when I lived in New Orleans, and it was part of, I think they called it their crime suppression unit, where they would just take 3 cars and they would just drive them through certain neighborhoods for that visibility to almost like scare people away. Like, oh, don't commit crime here. Go do it over there.
Yeah, we used to do that too. I don't remember what dopey name they had for it, but basically it'd be like 5 or 6 vans, and they would just drive up and down streets with the lights on. That's it. They would just drive all over the place, just to like scare people, I guess, or stop them for 10 minutes from committing a crime. I don't know. But we used to do the same thing. I don't remember what it was called, but yeah.
So, and you think about your 20 years in the NYPD, and you think about, your memories, and you think about the things that you like the most about the job. Where would you put the bike cop?
I don't know if it'd be that high up there, only because it was only for one summer. And I mean, it was fun, but it was a little boring too. But I mean, I worked with Steve for 6 years, and we always had a good time together. So
I've seen the two of them together. That's still a part of them for sure.
yeah, I mean, we used to have fun. Steve and I always had fun, even when we worked in a car together. So it was just being partners in a different way, But it was fun only because it was different at the time,
So the partnership thing is interesting too, because occasionally you see a police officer by himself or herself in a car. And I always thought that seemed, not that it's more dangerous, but it just seemed like it would be better to have someone in the car riding with you no matter what, right? So
Well,
even if it's a traffic stop, you have 2 cops.
Right. Well, in New York, they don't have one man. Well, I don't know, who knows what they'd have now, but because they're running out of cops. But
That's a problem.
But back for the longest time, there was never one cop in a car. If there was, it was mostly highway cops, and all they're really doing is giving out tickets and responding to accidents. Well, taking them forever to respond to accidents, but they're not doing any enforcement. If you're doing any kind of enforcement as far as answering jobs and potential arrest situations, there's never one cop ever.
So what is it like having a partner all the time with you? Because there's the opposite side of that, where you go to work, there's no alone time. None, no thinking time. You're in the car, especially if you're in the car together for your whole shift.
Right.
That's a very constricted setting. So how did that kind of manifest itself for you with Steve and with your other partners? What was that learning experience like?
Well, the trick is partnering up with someone who you can get along with. Like if you don't get along with the person, it's just misery.
I can imagine.
And it could be, I mean, it's a bunch of things. It could be personality wise, it could be work wise, it could be just like, listening to the different kinds of music in the car all day long. It's tough. I was pretty lucky. I mean, you because you work with people for so long and you see them all the time, and you go out drinking with them after work, you get to know people and you get to know what kind of people they are. And yeah, it's different when you work with them, but still that their personalities. So you do have some sort of say, if you want to work with someone. Obviously, like if Steve took a day off or if I took a day off, then obviously you're working with someone else. Mm-hmm. And then it's only one day, you got to deal with it. But I got to say I was pretty lucky. I worked, Chris I worked with for a little while. We talked about him the last time. He was good. I mean, he didn't want to do anything. But it was good. Steve was great. I mean, we used to argue all the time like a married couple. But, it was fun. But yeah, I mean, that's the trick. Like it's just like any other partnership, right? I mean, any kind of job or even any kind of relationship that you're in. The trick is finding someone that you can get along with and, tolerate for 8.5 hours.
And you have it's not stressful all the time, but being a cop, the spike stress goes up in some of those incidents you were talking about, like getting shot at, having a brick thrown at your head, having a bed frame thrown at your face. Those type of moments, or when you're chasing down a perp or whatever. So I think it seems to me on the surface level, where that relationship would really matter is making sure you can trust your partner in those high stress situations.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I could do that with Steve. Like, we spoke about the last time. Steve didn't say much. I did all the talking. Because Steve didn't know how to speak to people sometimes. But the biggest stress that I used to have with Steve was we used to work a lot of early shifts. Like we used to, we had a lot of 7 a.m. shifts. So we'd always be tired. One of us would always be exhausted when we came to work. And the morning, there's usually nothing going on. Like you're not getting a first call usually until like 9 o'clock in the morning. Like the only thing you're going to get early in the morning is like an alarm going off at a store or something like that. So the biggest fight every morning was who's going to take a nap. Someone had to take a nap and the other person had to listen to the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve, would always come in with these, sad stories of the night before, and he was exhausted. He needed sleep. So he always used to drive. So I was like, so it made sense for me to listen to the radio because, that was my job. So I used to let him sleep. But every single time that I was supposed to sleep, he fell asleep. Every single time. And he'll probably deny it, but absolutely every single time that I was supposed to sleep, he slept. So he was listening to the radio. And I remember one time we woke up and we used to sleep in the same spot every time. And it was kind of desolate, like all these big rich houses, and no one ever bothered us. But one morning I woke up to some old woman knocking on the window because she needed help with, I don't remember what it was. And I look over and he's still sleeping. He didn't even hear the woman knocking on the window.
So he would be, even if he was getting flagged down, he's like, sorry, he's out.
Yeah. So that was the biggest stress because then we'd fight about it for 20 minutes. But, we used to drive each other crazy too. Like he always had this problem of leaving his sunglasses in people's houses. I don't know why. I always told him, don't bring the sunglasses in. He always put them on the top of his head and then he'd put them down. And like, he always wore Oakleys or Ray-Bans. Like they were always expensive sunglasses. And he used to lose his mind when he remembered that he left them in the house and we'd have to go back. And I could probably 5 or 6 times I saw him doing it and I didn't say anything. Because you got to be taught a lesson, right?
Yeah.
Like how many times are you going to do it?
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So I would see him leave the glasses on the counter and we'd walk out and then we'd go to the car and I'd be like, dude, where's your glasses? And he'd be like, he flew his shit. But he got the biggest story I could tell about Steve getting me back was we went to a job where a woman from California couldn't get a hold of her aunt. So it was like a it was a checkup or whatever they used to call them back then. I don't even remember. So we asked the neighbors. Neighbors didn't hear from the woman. Apparently she didn't really go out. She didn't go out very often. So we were worried that, they were worried that she probably passed away. So we had to kick the door in and the woman was alive, but she had a stroke. She was in bad shape, but she was alive. So we're waiting for the ambulances to show up. And there was this woman, she was an EMT, and she loved me. And she was gorgeous, and we always used to flirt with each other and everything. And whenever I used to see her, like, we used to chat, BS all the time. So anyway, Steve knew this, obviously. And we go to this job, and we kick the door in. We call for EMS. EMS shows up, blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to get information on the woman and looking for neighbors' help and just trying to find out, like, who we going to contact to meet her at the hospital. She's got to go to the hospital, And I used to have this big clipboard. And it wasn't a clipboard. It was more like a box that had a clipboard on both sides. And the box contained old paperwork and stuff that I used to throw in there. So I'm walking around with this thing, and I'm writing on it. And I walk up to the EMT, and we start talking. And she looks at the back of my clipboard. She goes, oh, that's interesting. And I was like, what? And I turned the clipboard around, and there's a huge penis that Steve drew on the back of the clipboard. So here I am walking around with this clipboard for a good 15, 20 minutes, and I'm just like writing, I'm like asking people's information, and I'm writing
Doing
it
your
down.
job. Yep.
Yeah, and I got the clipboard, obviously facing the people that I'm talking to, and there's a huge cock on the back of the clipboard.
That basically sums up what a partnership is like in the NYPD, I imagine.
Yeah.
So what is it like when it's challenging to sit in a car with someone? Either maybe you had a fight because you get to know each other really well. I imagine
Right.
You do it for 6 years like you and Steve did. You know everything about each other most likely. So are there times where you're like, I can't even look at you right now?
More with my good friend Rob Coppola here on Equal Matters in just a moment. I want to talk to you about coaching because what coaching does is speed up your progress. It helps you learn new skills faster. A coach is going to help you also apply those lessons to your life. So if you're looking to grow, let me know. I'm Rob Hunter. I'm a coach, and I want to show you all of my broadcasting techniques. What will this help you do? You'll perform better at work. You'll be better with your personal relationships. Broadcasting skills come in handy because performance is all about how you use your voice. It's your main instrument, and you want to make sure that that instrument is in tune. The best way to go about this, if this sounds interesting to you, if you want to get to that next level, schedule a free 20-minute phone call with me. We can do it on Zoom, whatever you like. How do you do it? PaintedPorchStrategies.com/Rob. Schedule a one-on-one call right there. It'll take you to my calendar. PaintedPorchStrategies.com/Rob. Or check the show notes for this episode. Because one lesson I've learned in life, it's up to me. Invest in yourself, speed up your progress, challenge yourself, and hold yourself accountable with me as your coach. Let's work on how your voice gives you your ultimate advantage. Using your voice correctly unlocks your full potential. So schedule that free 20-minute phone call to consult with me at paintedporchstrategies.com/Rob or check the show notes for this episode. Now we'll get you back to New York Rob.
So are there times where you're like, I can't even look at you right now?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, all the time. Especially if we go to a job and he would make things worse for us, like by saying something stupid or whatever, and we'd get in the car and fight about it. I'm like, you do your job and shut up and let me do the paperwork. And let me do all the talking and the paperwork and just shut up. Or if he didn't handle something right, or if I blew off the handle every once in a while, we'd argue about it. But he used to work out. Oh my God, he used to work out in the morning. Sometimes in the morning before we got to work, and then we'd always work out during lunch. So during our lunch break, we'd work out, and then while we were actually working, we'd just stuff a sandwich in our face, before a job came in. But he used to take this, I don't know what the hell he used to take working out, but he used to stink up the car so freaking bad. That was probably the most fights we ever had because he would just stink up the car. It was like the movies. I don't even remember. Shaun of the Dead. I don't know if you've ever seen Shaun of the Dead, where the big guy goes, I'm sorry, Shaun. And Shaun's like, for what? And all of a sudden he smells the fart. That's the way Steve was. But now imagine you're in a car.
Yep. Especially if it's winter and you can't roll the windows down. It's 2 degrees outside.
Right. But yeah, I mean, we used to argue. Like I said, we was like a married couple. We used to argue all the time.
So you transitioned. So what'd you do? As you say, 9 years, as you said, kind of what you did on the street.
Yeah.
And then you broke your ankle trying to help the guy up the stairs.
Right.
So you're in the office. So this is around 2000 or so. You start kind of the office crime stats work.
No, that was more like 98.
98. Okay.
Like 99 almost.
So 98, 99. So I want to backtrack a little bit because I want to go back to 93. I don't remember if we talked about this because that was the first World Trade Center bombing.
Right.
So you're a cop at that point. What was the reaction like? Can you remember? I mean, you're a couple of years on the job. It's in Manhattan, so.
I don't even remember it happening. Like, I mean, because they certainly didn't use us for anything. Like, it wasn't the scale of 9/11. So I honestly don't even remember. I don't even know if I was working that day. And if I did, it didn't affect us at all because I
just went about your day.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they didn't deem it like an attempt to take down the towers. So it was just probably just like any other explosion. And it could be anywhere in the city. Like
just
it could be anything.
Day in New York.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly don't even, that's the first time anyone's ever asked me that question. I don't actually remember where I was, or I certainly didn't do anything afterward about it. That's for sure.
And it's fresher on my mind because I just listened to this whole podcast about that day and all the moving parts and then the immediate aftermath. And I was the same. I was in high school at the time. I knew it was a big deal, but up to that point in like American history, it was like, all right, nothing really I mean, people died obviously, but it wasn't as catastrophic as, what was coming 8 years later. So you're in the office, 98, 99, and you're doing crime stats. What did you do as far as crime stats go? Crime stats to me mean numbers.
Right. So, back in, I think I want to say 97, they started it. Right. So, some nerd came up with some analytical thing. came up with some program, and crimes are classified into 7 major categories in New York. So someone came up with some program, and everything had to be done on a floppy disk. And like you had to input the crime for each day. So every day you had to go into this computer program and input how many robberies there were, how many grand larcenies, how many felonious assaults, and then it just grew from there. Like it just went from simple, categories in crime to now it's like this huge monster that they created. And, now it was, okay, well, last year you had 50 robberies for the month. You got to make sure you go under 50 for the month. And then it just became this whole numbers game that, numbers fudging and all kinds of nonsense. It just got worse and worse and worse. And of course they upgraded everything, and then things became a lot easier. But then the job that I started became this whole unit. So like every precinct used to have just me doing it. And now you have a guy who's dedicated to solving where all the burglaries are in the precinct. And then now there's a guy who's dedicated to figuring out where all the robberies are, and now one cop is now you have 5 cops doing it because you are trying to figure out how to reduce crime.
Because that's the whole goal, right? So the goal is to say, okay, there were this many crimes. Here's where in the city they were. What can we do to make sure there's less?
Right. And, on a precinct level where I started, just like everywhere else, you have crimes that are in, sections A, B, and C. You want to push them out of A, B, and C and put them into A, B, and C from someone else's precinct.
That was what I was going to ask next is, would there be instances where, okay, I'm in precinct 102, which I know is not a real precinct, but to illustrate the point, but 103 is right next door. If we can just kind of nudge people, it's the 106 and 103's problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what that's exactly what they want you to do. Like if you have a crime problem that's on a border with another precinct, your job is to force them out and do it 3 blocks away or 4 blocks away, because that's all they care about. And it was called Comstat. That's what that was the name of it. It became Comstat. And they used to have meetings at One Police Plaza every week, and every Thursday, and every borough would go up. A borough would go up each week, and each of the commanding officers of the precincts that were called would just get grilled. Like, what are you doing for this? What are you doing to solve that? And it just became this whole bullshit session. It was just like just trying to appease the big bosses who really had no idea what was going on. Like, they can just, they can look at a precinct and see, oh, burglaries are up 35%, or the burglaries are up 50%, but not realizing that the month last year they only had like a ridiculously amount of low burglaries, and now this year like it's average, but you're up 60%. Now you have to explain that, and you can't just go there and say, well, last year we had lower numbers. You can't do that. You got to come up with some stupid plan that no one ever can enforce, just to give them bullshit.
Well, and is that getting into tricky territory too, because you're trying to prevent crimes from happening. So immediately Minority Report, the movie, comes to mind. You have the precogs, right? And they're predicting all these crimes. Because that, I think, where it gets difficult is, how do you respect the constitutional rights of people and still try to suppress crime in certain ways? Right,
and you can't. We discussed that the last time with the stop and frisk, right? Yeah. I mean, like, there's a million examples of having burglaries being done by whatever, like a 5'7" Hispanic kid wearing a black hoodie.
So every 5'7",
every single one you
5'8",
see, you're gonna toss him, and you might not get the kid that's doing the burglaries, but you're gonna get something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of that going on.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine they would be tied together, right? Because the stop and frisk is, okay, this happened. So if we're stopping and frisking all the Hispanic males that are 5'7", and we find a gun, we say, hey, we found a firearm. Look at us.
Right.
Good job, us. Go stop and frisk. Right. Meanwhile, as later has been ruled, that those were not constitutionally kosher.
Right.
But the pressure is there. So how did you manage that, being in the middle of it for your precinct, gathering all the crime stats, to not get manipulated by bosses?
Well, yeah, and that's the funny thing, because like when I was doing it at precinct level, I would have to look. Every morning I would come in, and I would look at all the reports from the night before, every report that was made, and all the reports that were created for the 7 major crimes, I'd have to bring them back and I'd have to read through them, right? So if there was one that was questionable, for instance, okay, Johnny got pushed and his wallet was removed, that's a robbery. So we'd have to, if the story wasn't that detailed or, didn't look right, we'd literally have to call up the complainant and be like, did you actually get pushed? Or do you think the person just bumped into you and took your wallet, with you not knowing? Because a robbery is a lot different than a grand larceny as far as the NYPD, because it's still a major crime, but you don't want to be up in robberies because a robbery is a more serious crime than a grand larceny. So if you have someone pickpocket you, that's not as bad as getting robbed.
So what would be the difference? So I'm just stealing stuff. I'm stealing your stuff. It's like stealing stuff out of a store. Robbery gets into what? Physical?
A robbery is a threat of force or use of force.
Threat or use.
Right.
And what's a burglary?
A burglary is breaking into an establishment, a home, a dwelling, or any kind of business where force is used, or not even force, just entering illegally and removing property.
So it's an elevation. So you have the grand larceny at this level, you step up to robbery, but once you go inside of a house, and then there's armed burglary, so if you bring a firearm or a weapon,
right,
now that elevates it even more.
Right.
So this is what you're keeping track of. You're calling people on the phone, and you say, sure you were pushed. So that's a lot of legwork.
Right, yeah. And basically, the only reason why you're doing this is to try to manipulate the people to not admit to being a victim of one of the 7 crimes, because they don't want the numbers to go up.
Of course.
So
if we can count this as a grand larceny, no one cares about grand larceny numbers as much as burglaries, robberies, and homicides.
And it's just it's just like the same thing that goes on today, right? So people leave their car doors open, and for some stupid reason, they leave their wallets in the car.
I know. It's the strangest thing.
So obviously someone's wallets get stolen and their credit cards get stolen and their credit cards get used. That becomes a grand larceny. And then we have to call these people and find out what happened. And, and it's like, well, was the car locked or was it open? Well, it's still a grand larceny because the credit card was stolen, but they try to knock it down to a petty larceny. So yeah, it's just a whole big numbers game. It's just,
you have to know all the categories.
Yeah, you have to know the law. I mean, you have to know, obviously the each section of each crime. And it was, it's just nonstop. It doesn't stop. So over a weekend, because, we used to have weekends off. And if it was a busy weekend, I'd be in there for hours just reading and calling people. And half the people don't even want to talk to you because when you call them, they just want their shit back. They don't care what happened. They're like, I just want my whatever. I just want it back.
Right.
You know?
I don't care what you categorize this as.
Right. They don't care.
I'm just missing what's mine.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So in a story, like you made up, right? So Johnny, did you get pushed? So what if the complainant, the victim, says, yeah, you know what? I guess I can't really be sure that I was pushed. Maybe it was just a pickpocket. So then you say, okay, thank you.
Right.
And do you write on the paperwork, spoke to...
Right. Well, yeah. Once the original report is created, it's written in stone. Anything that changes, a supplement has to be prepared. So I have to prepare a supplement saying I spoke to the complainant on blah, 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 blah hours on this date. States that whatever... thinks that he was not pushed, that it might have been just a pickpocket, reclassified to whatever.
Mm-hmm. And then you put that in your crimes category.
Right, and then it gets taken off. It gets taken off, whatever, or changed. And then every time it goes up to Manhattan, which, on the floppy disk originally, it gets edited. But then, then we had the big meetings, when they started giving us crimes, each person would get a crime, someone would get burglary to investigate. Whenever we'd have the big meetings up in Manhattan, I was in charge of rapes. So I had to, any rape that we had in the period that we were using in this meeting that we had in Manhattan, I had to go through all the DD5s, that's the supplement to the original report. They're called DD5s. I have to go through all the DD5s and all the reports and see if there's any inconsistencies with the rape, because obviously you do not want to go there to the meeting up in rapes at all. So they looked at every rape with a fine-tooth comb because they wanted to make sure that they weren't going up with rapes. And sadly, most rapes are bullshit.
Really?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. because I know this for a fact because this is what I did for when I worked at a precinct level. Even when I went to the borough level, I was still doing rapes.
So, and I just want to clarify that. So, precinct, you're in one place doing crime for that precinct.
Right.
So,
So I was in the 6-2. So
6-2.
I was in the 6-2. So that I worked there. That's a precinct level, and then I went to the borough. It's called the borough, and the borough is a parent precinct to all the precincts that are under it. So the 6-2 was one of those precincts. So I had 13, 14 precincts that were under me at a borough level.
Yeah.
So when I went to the borough, I had to review the rapes from all these precincts. And yeah, a lot of them are sadly bullshit.
So is it accusers making things up?
No, it's mostly women who had sex with someone and got caught, or a teenager who didn't go home that night, or a wife who got busted by the husband.
And you guys investigated these, so there's actual.
Well, I don't actually investigate
you don't,
it.
but
right.
Someone does.
Someone at the precinct level would
Yeah.
investigate it, or from sex crimes. Because the sex crimes also gets it once it happens, it goes to the precinct level. Obviously, the precinct detectives, and then it goes to a sex crimes unit, and they investigate it too. And then obviously the detectives at the precinct level and the detective at the sex crimes will communicate as to what they find.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because that charge rape, if you see a high number in any city, we live in Phoenix now, you'd be like, oh man, tell all your female friends and your
Right.
partners, like, careful out there. So the number actually matters, but especially because it's so damaging, right? To be accused of that, it has to be gone over with the fine-tooth comb for that, especially given the fact that you know that a certain percentage are traditionally untrue.
Yeah, I mean, you read some of them, and it's almost amazing how they, because you can't just not believe someone, right? So when it comes to rape, you can obviously you'd be like, okay, you got to take the person's word for it, right? But when you read the supplements, the DD5s, and there was one, the one that sticks out in my mind the most was married woman meets a guy at a bar. They go to a hotel. They do their business. They sleep there. They get up in the morning. They do it again. He drives her home. And then she was raped.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Because you want to think that doesn't happen, but you know that it does.
Yeah. But, my biggest problem with the whole thing, and we're going a little off course, but my biggest problem with the whole thing is that nothing ever happens to these women. Nothing. They don't get arrested for a false report because it's a rape. Because unfortunately, there are people that are actually raped, and obviously it's
Absolutely.
terrible. But why doesn't anything happen to these people? Because you can have your brand new car that I can't afford this car. Let's go dump it somewhere and set it on fire. And then 2 months later, they find out that it's an insurance job. Guess what? You're getting locked up for a false report. What's the difference?
Especially because it is so damaging to someone's reputation to accuse them of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like someone went to jail. Someone got arrested. That guy got arrested, the one that drove the girl home. He got arrested.
Wow. And who knows what happened to him after that?
Yeah, I mean, eventually, obviously he got let go because.
But still, right?
Right.
Is there lasting
Right.
damage? Is
Yeah.
there mental
What
health?
happens if he's married or his job finds out? I mean,
exactly.
that's what I'm like. Nothing that used to drive me up. That used to drive me crazy.
Well, because you think about it the opposite way, like you just explained. So if there's a crime, and there is a crime, committing a false police report, and I would think that you would send a message and say, look, we take rape accusations very seriously. We investigate them thoroughly, but if you fake it, we're going to come after you. Because I think it's only happened a couple of times in my, I've been doing this for 25 years covering news, and I think there's only been a couple stories of women being charged with filing a false police report.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember anyone from reading all those reports saying that the female got arrested.
Wow.
I can't. I mean, it probably wouldn't be on there anyway, but I don't remember seeing any.
So why crime stats? I get that you want to have a number. It's kind of easy to follow. But it's something that in my business, the media business, that media people look at. Homicide number is always the one, right? It's always the top one. So
homicides and shootings are the biggest ones.
Yeah. Because when I lived in New Orleans, crime was the same thing, right? It's a city with some economic challenges, and there was a high murder rate. And it was always trying to compare last year's to this year's.
Right.
Oh, there was more this year. Oh, my goodness. So what benefit does that give the NYPD to keep track of all these things?
What's the benefit of keeping the crime down?
Or keeping the stats and spending all this man hours, right? So I'm thinking about as far as resources. So you, 5 cops doing it, all the boroughs, the big meetings in Manhattan.
Okay, what it boils down to is the mayor and the police commissioner want to be the heroes. No, that's exactly what it is. Because they want to go on TV on January 1st and say crime is down 20% for the previous year. And that's all it is. That's all I care about.
See, and I think that we have a misconception of crime. Obviously, there are crimes that happen all across, say, New York City, all across Phoenix, Houston, wherever. But the primary, I guess I would say, zip code range is a lot smaller where most of the heavier crimes traditionally
Of course,
sit.
right. Yeah.
So it's almost, the numbers are what the media likes and sort of what people who watch the media like. Because we like to see, there were 200 homicides in 1999. There was 195 in 2000. Raw, making progress.
Yeah.
Even though it's a statistical anomaly that you can't really control, but it just sounds good. So I learned something. I was reading this book, and it said that in Kansas City, they developed a policing method. We may have talked about this last time. And they focused on a 3 square mile area of the city because the crime was so high.
Right.
You could probably do that in Brooklyn. You could probably do that in the Bronx, Queens, right? So instead of trying to educate the public, right, of, hey, crimes happen in really small areas for the most part. Most of the time you're safe walking around New York, even going on the subway. But that's not it, because that heroism, right? Aha, Michael Bloomberg, look at me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I was working at the borough level, and we had those 13 precincts that would have to directly report to us on crime. It's usually October is when the panic would start. If a precinct was going to be over in crime for the year. And then I had to put my Microsoft Excel skills to work. And I had to figure out how much crime they had to play with to come out even or go under for the year. So I created all these spreadsheets from any command that was close to being up for the year and how many crimes they could play with every day.
Wow.
Yeah, and if a precinct had a bad weekend, oh my God, it was like all hell broke loose.
Mm-hmm. Well, and couldn't that mean that if you're so driven by that number, you might go back to your classification and say, maybe we'll classify this as...
Absolutely.
I'm going to press pause just for a second here on Equal Matters. Back to Rob Coppola in a moment. Listening is an incredibly underrated communication skill because listening provides you information you could use to your advantage to solve problems. Ask the right people, the right questions, get information, look amazing at work. Now, listening is just one of the many communication skills that you're going to hone in my communications and performance program. It's called Master Your Message. I'm Rob Hunter, the host of Equal Matters. For the past 25 years, I've solely relied on my voice to share ideas, get buy-in and influence on talk radio stations across this country. All of these skills spread out over 8 hours in 8 modules for you to help you sharpen your listening skills, to use them to your advantage. You'll also learn techniques to nail presentations, handle disputes, and how to use different communication styles with different people. What you say, that's your billboard. So broadcast wisely with Master Your Message. Not only will your work life improve, your relationships will improve. Those most important relationships to you are all geared around how well you communicate. Master Your Message is designed to help you do just that and also help you open the doors you want to get a seat at the table you want. So don't delay. Take action now because this is an investment in you. PaintedPorchStrategies.com/communication is where you want to go. PaintedPorchStrategies.com/communication or check this episode's show notes. Now we'll get you back to New York Rob Coppola here on Equal Matters.
Well, and couldn't that mean that if you're so driven by that number, you might go back to your classification and say, maybe we'll classify this as...
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were instructed to tell the crime analysis people from each precinct to go back and read through all their reports and make sure that they're being classified correctly. And if they didn't like the answers, we'd have to do it. And then we'd have to call these people and tell them that what you did was wrong. This is what you did. It's not right. Fix it.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because the pressure's there. And this is what we always want everything to be on, like a moral compass, but it never is because humans are humans. And of course, if there's a measurement in which your ass is on the line and you can move things around and no one's really going to notice, you're going to at least think about it.
Yep.
Maybe try it.
Mm-hmm.
So did you experience, I mean, again, this is what's great about this, Rob, is that the honesty of how policing works, maybe how it should work, how it shouldn't work. So how often would you guess that you saw coloring in a gray area?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
There was a ton of numbers fudging going on.
So
all the time.
basically it's mostly fake.
I wouldn't say mostly fake. I would say a good 20%.
Okay.
25%. You know, and the two things that no one ever realizes, especially when it comes to crime stats in New York, how many crimes do you think get committed each day that do not get reported? Like junkies, homeless people. These are the people that are committing most of the crimes anyway. How many people do you think get robbed on a daily basis and don't say a word? Don't say anything?
A lot.
And the second thing is, me and you can have a beef, and I can shoot at you 70 times in the street. If I shoot at you 70 times and I don't hit anything, it doesn't count as a shooting. It doesn't count. I actually have to hit someone for it to count as a shooting.
What if he hit a car?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
You have to cause an injury to a person.
Wow.
That's it.
So isn't that something?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more shots fired
in
in shooting incidents than are ever written down.
Oh, oh my God. If they counted that, half the time you probably couldn't prove it anyway, right? Because people don't, you follow next door anywhere you are in the world, everyone thinks they hear shots fired.
Every noise.
Yeah, every time they hear something, someone's on next door is like, oh, did anyone hear those shots? No, dummy, it was a car backfiring. You know, it's like, so you can't really prove it anyway. But yeah, but in the hood, if you shoot at someone like 25 times and you don't hit anything, it doesn't count.
It's like a forest falling in the trees. Does it
yeah,
make a sound?
no one hears it. I know. Well, no, everyone hears it. No one does anything about it.
Calling,
yeah.
So if you look back and you do your years at Crime Stats, did you enjoy that? And why? Like, what was it about that job that was like, yeah, this is pretty cool?
Well, you know me. I have a photographic memory, and I'm like Rain Man. I'm good with numbers, and I was always good with that. So it was interesting at the beginning because when I took over my job at the borough level, the two people that were in the office did everything by hand and by paper. It was a complete waste of time. Like logistically, it was so stupid. And I came in and I sat down with my boss and I'm like, I can modify this and computerize everything in here in a week. And it would be so simple. Mm-hmm. Instead of collecting 13, 14 pieces of paper from every precinct, just have us send us an email or anything. This is such a waste of time. And I can just manually put it into a spreadsheet. Well, unfortunately, 4 months later, those two people got kicked out of the office. Whoops. And I was the only one left. I did enjoy it because I'm very organized.
It's very true. It's very fastidious.
Yeah, and I ran things the way I wanted, and it worked. And they loved it. The bosses loved it. When we had these meetings, it was stressful as hell. Because,
I remember talking to you. He was up, getting into the big meeting.
Yeah, because we used to find out the week before that we had the meeting on Thursday, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would work probably 18 hours a day, 16, 18 hours a day. That's when I was working at the borough level. At the command level, it wasn't so bad because we had people that could all do it and pitch in. And to some effect, I had that at the borough level. But the problem was at a borough level, you're dealing with much bigger bosses. You're dealing with chiefs now. And when shit would hit the fan, it would fall back on me. And because there was a lot of things that I was responsible for. And when I used to get reamed for something that was really my responsibility, but someone else handled it, I lost it. Mm-hmm. So I went into my bosses. I'm like, listen, if I'm going to be responsible for this, I have to do it. I have to control everything that comes out of here. So they're like, we don't care. So that's why I was working 16, 18 hours a day, because I needed to make sure that everything that came out of my office, my desk, came from me and not from somebody else. Because people just didn't care.
Yeah.
Like they were told, here, you got to do this and help out Rob. They're like, oh, okay, but who cares, right? Because if it gets fucked up, it's me, it's not them.
Right.
So that I didn't enjoy so much. But I mean, when we had a lot more successes and failures at the big meetings in Manhattan, so it was good. That was, I felt good about that.
Yeah, as you should, especially if it's 16, 17, 18-hour days, making sure it's all right so that when it's presented, it's actual and factual.
Yeah, and the bosses loved me because they never really got reamed, because, the bosses don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
The big bosses don't know what's going on. Like, they
the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, they know that crime might be up or crime's going on here, but they don't know, like, all the little things that's happening, and they have to get filled in, obviously, before we go to the meetings. And, a lot of times they weren't held responsible for a lot because we had everything covered,
So you mentioned chiefs. How's the NYPD breakdown? So the top is the commissioner of the New York City Police Department, and where does it go from there?
So you have the commissioner, and then you have chiefs. So you have different ranks of chiefs. 1 star, 2 stars, obviously, and then it goes down from there. So you have deputy commissioner, you have captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and stuff like that. So there's probably above the rank of sergeant. Let's see, there's lieutenant, captain, deputy inspector, inspector, and a chief. So there's probably 7 ranks above a sergeant, and then it gets to the commissioner.
And what does the commissioner essentially do?
The commissioner back in the day was the man. He was the man, he was the man. It was the first woman commissioner, just left, but he was the man who ran the NYPD. Like what he said was gospel. It was word. When Giuliani became mayor, it started to change a little bit because Rudy wanted to control everything. And then once Rudy left, it all became the commissioner became a puppet for the mayor.
Like a political appointee.
Yeah, I mean, the commissioner really had no say in anything. It was just the mayor. The commissioner was just speaking for the mayor. That's all it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shame because there was a lot of good commissioners that just became jerks because they just didn't want to get fired for doing the wrong thing for the mayor.
So what did that mean? As an officer, you see your commissioner. You probably hear about your commissioner. Was there commissioners that you were like, yeah, I'm glad I work for that person?
There was a guy who came from transit. His name was Bratton, Commissioner Bratton. He was a transit cop, and people loved him. He had 2 stints. He was the commissioner twice. The first time around, he was great. He didn't take any shit from the mayor. This is what he needed to do, and he did it. The second time around, he was a puppet. But Bratton was probably the best. The one that just left apparently was loved. She was beloved. Sewell, I think her name is. And she came from Nassau County Police.
Which is Long Island, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she was loved there. And the cops loved her. But the mayor of New York is an idiot.
Former cop, too.
Yeah.
Eric Adams.
And he was upset because she was more popular than him, so he fired her. So now the next person, of course, will be just some appointee by the mayor who will probably have no clue because he's just going to be a puppet.
Yeah, he'll do whatever the mayor wants.
Right.
So what does that mean for the officers? So you've kind of been through that, right? You had the good chief or the good commissioner and then some puppets. So if you have a good commissioner, what's the morale like amongst the officers compared to when you have a puppet? What are the officers thinking and doing?
Yeah, obviously, if you have a good commissioner who's going to have your back and, if he says, listen, the cops have to do A, B, and C, and the cops do A, B, and C, and people don't like A, B, and C, the commissioner's going to have your back no matter what. So, of course, morale is going to be great, right? If you have a commissioner that says you have to do A, B, and C, and then you do it, and then, you end up on the news, and the commissioner doesn't have your back, like, why am I wasting my time? Why am I doing my job? Why am I arresting anyone? Why am I doing anything? And unfortunately, that's the way it's probably been. I mean, it was like that for me, probably 4 or 5 years before I left. And I'm sure it's even worse now. Even though the new commissioner was good, I mean, their hands are just tied behind their back. You can't do anything anymore there. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have good bosses, the morale's great.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't happen very often. unfortunately.
We talked about this a little bit last time as to why you didn't go kind of the management route. So what type of officer tries to move up the ranks? I mean, I know that's a broad question.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. I mean,
because you basically have to take a test, right?
Right.
So you study, you take your test, you pass, and then what? You get placed.
Right. It's just like when you're a cop coming out of the academy, right? So you pass, you take a sergeant's test, you pass, and then it's like if you know someone, they put you somewhere you want, put you somewhere nice. If you don't know anyone, you're going somewhere that's a shithole. I mean, that's just the way it goes. It's just like coming out of the police academy. I don't know. The mindset. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there. Like I came out of the academy with a guy who's now a 2-star chief, and you could tell his goal was to just go as high as he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't care who he had to step on, what he had to do. He just wanted the prestige to be the chief and be the big man on campus. I think most of the people on the job that try to get promoted just want the money.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense.
Just want the salary bump, because it's pretty big. Once you get the captain, you can't make a cash overtime anyway. But yeah, I think most of the guys probably want to get promoted because of the pay bump.
Yeah, because that's another interesting part about, especially when you started. So you're a rookie cop, and you remember how much money you were making?
$600 a week.
$600 a week in New York City.
Yeah.
And even though it was 91, still, New York has always been the most expensive city in America. So that's hard to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that big day, 9/11.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, was it $600 every other week?
600 every other week.
I think it was 600 every other, because we get paid twice a week,
So
right?
$1,200 a month.
Twice. Yeah, we get paid twice a month. So it was a little over $600 every paycheck. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's $1,200 a month.
And so is it you have a wage while you're a rookie cop, and what do you have to do? Like your 90 days? Was it 6 months? I can't remember.
So once you get out of the academy, you don't get a pay raise until your 5th year on the job.
Wow.
So you get like little increases, which is nothing.
Yeah.
But once you get that 5th year, it's like a $20,000 jump. Because they just want to
Make sure you stay in.
Right. Make sure you stay in. Don't do anything stupid, because if you do, you're getting fired. Yeah. So it's 5 years you're suffering.
It's like your NFL rookie contract. It's not as good as your next one.
Yep.
So it's just so fascinating to me that's how things, and that's how low a pay entry level is to be a New York City police officer.
Yeah. I mean, from the time I retired, I don't think that we reached the top 50 in paid police departments in the country.
Even though you're the largest.
Yeah. I don't think we ever went under 50.
Wow. Which is crazy to even think about.
And it is, but it's not, right? Because, I mean, there's 30,000 cops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the city, of course, is always claiming bankruptcy. So, like, how are they going to pay all these people? So I get it, but it just sucks, when you're in that position. And again, like, you can't complain because, we all knew we were getting into.
That's true.
Right? I knew what I was getting into, but I knew that I was going to retire in 20 years. So I'm like, I'll suck it up.
And I guess that's power perspective. So 20 years, I could do it. But you can stack overtime, right? So the overtime is really what helps you out. Granted, you have to work
of course
40 hours.
Right. Yeah, and that's another reason why I never really got a promotion, because I didn't care about working. I didn't care about putting the hours in, and I liked making the overtime. So, yeah, I worked a lot more, but I probably got paid as a lieutenant salary for most of my career, because I didn't care. I just wanted to work.
How does the overtime work? Is it different ways? So is it like, I will volunteer for anything, just sign me up? And what types of things do you do on overtime?
Well, it comes down from comes down from Manhattan headquarters. Headquarters then sends out all that overtime to each borough, and that's where I ended up. The boroughs then send out the overtime to all the precincts under them, right? So when it comes down to a precinct level, it's just, the same people get it all the time. The older guys, the guys that are retiring, and it's just not that much of it, right? But when you're at a borough level, you get the piece of that before it goes anywhere. So that's why working at the borough was so great, because I was able to get it before it went out. And it could be anything. It could be a street fair. It could be, then obviously like you'll have a flare up of some kind of demonstration, but mostly it was, street fairs or parades or, the barriers, like those metal gates that are everywhere that you see. That's a constant every week. They're always doing that. And that's all overtime.
So you have to work your regular day, and then you go put up barriers, or you come in on a Saturday.
Mostly on your days off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on patrol, it's hard because obviously if you get stuck with something, you can't really do it. So it's just basically on your days off. Mm-hmm. If you're working during the week, if you really want to work the overtime, you just make an arrest. You make an arrest like with 15 minutes left in your tour. But I never did that, and I wasn't doing that.
Like, no, I'm not going to arrest people. I'm not going to stay late for arresting people.
That's just blood
You
money.
would put up barriers or men. I'll do it all day.
That's blood. Yeah, exactly. I never cared about working on the weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's what. You get in, you do your 8 hours, you go home, and you got extra money in your pocket. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But it does go back to... So you and I met, actually, on a cruise, which is a fascinating story in and of itself. 2002 is the year after 9/11. We had the same dinner table. Rob had to sit next to me and my family, and it was, here we are, 21 years later. But that reason that you went on that trip is because after 9/11, the cruise line gave New York City police officers a discount because of that day.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, so let's rewind the clock, and let's go back to that day, that Tuesday morning. So you're probably at work, normal day, until we know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So walk me through, if you don't mind. It might be this, it's obviously a tough day, but if you don't mind, like, what was that day like for you?
Well, the first started at 8:37. I don't remember the times, but I was in the office, and we always had the TV on, and depending on who got early that morning, put on Good Morning America or some stupid nonsense, or the news would be on, or someone would risk putting on ESPN, but that never would last. But the TV for some reason wasn't on this day, and one of the guys who was in charge of operations, and operations are the ones that hand out all the overtime. They're the ones that deal with if something flares up in one of the precincts, they have to get people out really quick. He comes in the office and he says, "Did you see what's going on in Manhattan?" So we're like, "No." So he puts the TV on, and we see the gaping hole in the first tower, and we're like, "Oh shit!" So people were just like, "Wow!" Like how everyone's like, "How could a plane not see that?" Like people were just like, "How is that possible? Like how does that even happen?" So at this time, wasn't really panicked. They were just like, "Okay, plane hit the building. It'll just be Manhattan thing." And then obviously when the second tower hit, then all hell broke loose. We had to send one sergeant and 10 cops from every precinct in the city, essentially. But because we were only part of Brooklyn South, we were only charged of Brooklyn South, we had to get one sergeant and 10 cops from every precinct and send them into Manhattan. And they had no idea what was going on.
That was, you immediately went to work. So you said, all right, I'm going to find some of these officers and send them over.
Right. So we had to get on the phones and start calling people and making sure that get there as fast as possible. And then I don't know how many, I'm sure they all probably made it down there before the first tower fell. And then when the first tower fell, then it was chaos because they didn't know where people were. I mean, it was such madness down there that they didn't even know where to put people because, and you got to imagine if there's 70 precincts and they probably got everyone from everywhere. There's probably a good, I don't know, 100 precincts worth of people down there. So when the towers came down, they probably had no clue what was going on. I know a lot of guys weren't even doing anything. They were just standing there waiting to be told what to do. So when the tower came down, then our responsibility was trying to get a hold of every single person that went down there, which was essentially impossible because the radios didn't work. The radios went down. Phone lines didn't work because everyone was trying to call everyone. So we couldn't get a hold of anyone, and it was just madness. And then my sergeant was like, "Let's go." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, let's go." I was like, "All right." So we suited up, And, we went down there after the second tower fell. And the thing I remember was that we were driving through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, which is probably about 12 minutes from my office with no traffic. I know that never happens. But it took us like 10 minutes to get there. And I remember going through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And if anyone's ever been in the tunnel, it's just one lane in each way. And it's like if you're claustrophobic, you're not going through this tunnel without freaking out. And I remember going through that tunnel doing like 100 miles an hour because I could.
Yeah.
Just because I could, because like you never get a chance to go like anytime over 50 in that thing. And I remember coming out of that tunnel, which is not very far, and like it was like being in a movie set. It was so bizarre. I mean, because I've been there I've driven through there a million times, and as soon as you come out of that tunnel, it was amazing. You couldn't believe it. The debris was waist high in a lot of places, and the smell was just something I'll never forget. And people were working like zombies because they just didn't know like what the hell had just happened, and it was crazy. And, no one had a mask on, and even when they gave us a mask, like they gave us a stupid shit mask that these dopes are wearing now for COVID. And it's like, that didn't,
The paper mask.
yeah, like that wasn't doing anything. I mean, God only knows. I mean, unfortunately we do know what was in all that debris, but I mean, just the bodies and the debris, and it was just the smell I'll never forget. And I had to throw out all my clothes, my uniform I had to throw out because I couldn't get the smell out. And I refused to smell that all the time.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So, yeah. So it was crazy. So we were there for probably, I don't know, a few hours. Again, no one knew what to do. This was unprecedented. Like, no one had any clue what to do. And we were just wandering around, like trying to, we couldn't really help anyone. Like people just, a lot of people had fled, thank God, by then, but there were still people just staring around, like not knowing what the hell to do. We just had to get people out of the way for everyone to show up, like all the emergency vehicles to show up and stuff. And I probably stayed there until nighttime. And then it was just 12-hour shifts every day.
Same place, Ground Zero.
Yeah.
What was that like? I can't imagine that's easy.
Well, it was 12-hour shifts, and half the command basically had to go to Ground Zero. No, I wouldn't say it was that much. I would probably say it was probably 10, 20 cops a day probably had to go there on 12-hour shifts. So I was going through a divorce at the time, so I was by myself, and there was a lot of people that had kids and hardships and stuff. So I just volunteered. I volunteered, and I went there every day for almost 2 months. I didn't get a day off for over 6 weeks.
So what went through you remember what went through your mind during that whole period? So even going back to the very beginning, you come through the tunnel, you're there for a number of hours, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to come back 12 hours a day for the next 8 weeks.
Well, the first day we went back, the first day on the 12th, the job that we got was going into the adjacent buildings and looking for body parts. That's the job that we got. And that didn't last very long. And I don't know what they did with us then. And then we went back the second day, and they gave us the same thing again, and people didn't want to do that. So I don't know who they gave them to at the end, but I never did any of the search and rescue stuff. Like I wasn't crawling around and all that crap that people unfortunately were dying in. I was basically just security after that first few days, just stopping all these idiots from trying to go in and take pictures, and just making sure that no one was getting down to the site.
And you think about now the technology we carry in our pockets versus then, and you think about what you probably saw in so many of your other NYPD officers and rescuers and firefighters. We would all have seen all of the same things, except back then you didn't.
Right.
So you saw things that couldn't be replicated very easily like they can now.
Right.
So what does that do, or what did that do to your mind? Like what was going on in just being there? I mean, this is the worst thing that's happened in modern American history, probably American history, and you're right there.
Yeah, well, the first couple of days were just surreal. I mean, just being able to see, looking into the site and just seeing the wreckage and just realizing like all the death and destruction. It was just so surreal for the first few days. And then after that, they kind of sectioned it off where you really couldn't get down there. I mean, you could still see it obviously, but unfortunately it just becomes second nature, right? After a little while, and it's just like, hey, this is the way it is. This is my job, and I just got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So I think after the first week, it just unfortunately just became like just being at any other location that I stood at for 20 years of my life, But I mean, I'm thankful I didn't have to do any of that search and rescue stuff, because a lot of those guys got sick and died, because no one knew what was in there.
And, you're a cop. This is what you do. You sign up, you go in, you rescue people. You're a firefighter. It's what you do. So you don't think about the long term, because now plenty of officers that have passed away from 9/11. I don't know if we call it disease, cancers, various things.
Yeah, and I personally know 4 that I knew personally. And, obviously being on Facebook and you see all these stories still popping up of people dying from, ground zero related illnesses. And, no one knew. I mean, who could know? I mean, again, and even if they did know, they'd go anyway, because that's just the way it is, it just sucks, the whole thing.
What did it change for you as far as being a cop, 9/11? What, as far as your career, did you think about?
Well, I know I was standing out there one day. I could vividly remember where I was. I was right in front of the Marriott Hotel, which is right around the corner from the World Trade Center. And I was just looking down at the wreckage, and I said to myself, this is going to happen again. This is definitely going to happen again. And I just decided that I was going to, there was no way I was staying past 20 years. And I'm like, I'm going to get out of here as fast as I can. I'm just going to accumulate as much time as I can and just get out. And I knew that the minute I retired, I was going to leave that city. I knew it, because I'm like, this is going to happen again.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully it hasn't, but the way things are going now, who knows, but yeah, that's the biggest thing that came out of that was I'm leaving. And a friend of mine, we talked about in the last time, my friend Frank, he wanted to do the same, but he didn't. He stayed longer than I did, but that was my goal, was to get out.
So that day you start formulating kind of, all right, this is where I'm going, and then you kind of came up with your master plan to be able to pull it off at your 20 years.
Yeah.
So when 9/11 happens every year, what do you think about?
Basically, I think about the guys that I knew that died and the friends that I've made. I've made a bunch of friends from being down there. And we all still communicate with text, hope you're doing well, blah, blah, blah. And it's not a bad thing. I do remember I for the 10-year anniversary, I was at a Jets game, and it was a Jets played the Dolphins, and it was a night game. And I was nervous. Like, I was like, shit's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 10-year anniversary, these people, that's their thing. Like, they want to make a statement. Everything with them is, relevant. And I'm like, something's going to happen. And I was nervous going to that game. But thankfully nothing happened. But, yeah, I mean, basically every year it's just a reflection. And, I get sad in the morning. Usually, like, I go on Facebook and I just see countless things. It just brings back memories. But for the most part, it's just keep in touch with the people that, meant something from it, that came out of all that.
What would you like us to know from your perspective, a cop's perspective, about that day that maybe we don't know?
I don't know. That's a good question and a tough one. Obviously, we touched on the fact that a lot of those guys and girls knew what they were getting into, and they did it anyway. And that's just what being a cop is, And I don't know. I don't know what else. I don't. It's tough to say, because Like one, I sent this to you. I sent this meme to you a couple of weeks ago that I found, and we talked about it. And the meme says, "I wish my head could forget the things that my eyes have seen."
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most, probably the biggest thing that I want people to understand from that day, because none of it was good when you're there, and just to think about it. But other than that, I don't really know of anything else that people might not know per se from being down there so often. But I don't know.
And how time passes. You think about people that have been born after 2001 and how they have a completely different perspective because they didn't watch it on TV.
Right.
Or they weren't here when it happened. So that's another part that I think is super interesting, because it did seem, you mentioned the 10-year, it did seem consistently every year we had remembrances, and then after 10 we kind of dialed it back a little bit to now it's, there but not really. Because it used to be like my job as a talk show host, we would do this and we would say this and we would reminisce about this. But somewhere in that mix we stopped doing that. Does that have an impact on you, the fact that it's not as prominent a day as it used to be?
I think it does to some extent. I mean, there's a whole generation now, people probably don't even believe that it happened. Right? I mean, it's 22 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole generation has gone by, and people have no idea what happened. Not that it bothers me or it upsets me at all, but it's just like everything else. Know your history, right? Try to understand how people are from what happened. And I don't think a lot of people care. And unfortunately, the longer it goes on, less people are going to care.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just went to New York in December, but I did not go to the memorial. I don't know if it was avoidance. I don't know if it was like, this is a vacation. So, plus I really spent a pretty good portion of my life studying the event, how it happened, who Al Qaeda was, the 19 hijackers. So I think that I don't need to go there to remember it, because I still think about it all the time and how it happened and why it happened and what warning signs, what are we missing now, what's the patterns. So I do it from that analyst standpoint. But I remember after we met on the cruise the year after, I went up to New York to visit you in October of that year, and I almost became that close, almost moved in, moved on to Staten Island. But I remember I went down there, and it was a year and a month. It was October of 2020 or 2002, and there was still all the pictures around that church that's right outside that were still there, like the missing people. That, to me, a year plus 13 months after, is one of those moments in my life, just walking around that I'll never forget. And that was, again, 13 months after. So that impact of 13 months was still pretty severe, but it can't even come close to what it must have been like standing there for 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I won't ever go there again. I don't want to. Because to me, it's a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
And to me, it's the biggest grave in this country's ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go there. I never want to see it.
What about the city? You going to go back to the city?
If I have to.
Maybe to go see your Rangers
I'll
play.
go to a hockey game. That's about it.
Now, and it's also interesting, too, because fast forward to what was it, what year was it? Because it was Derek Jeter's hit, too, where he became the all-time Yankees hit leader.
Oh, yeah. I don't
You and I
remember
were there on that day. It was a September 11th.
That's right.
So at least you had the Jets game, you got the Jeter hit. So there's a couple maybe balances in there.
Yeah, there's always good days and bad days. Like I said, I get a little sad, just looking back at the memories that people post on Facebook. But now it's just another day, right?
Yeah.
That's why they have the baseball games or the football games. There's just another day.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was the good that you saw when you were standing down there? So again, ground zero, you're there for 8 weeks, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. People were curious. I think it seemed to, from my outsider's perspective, bring sort of a caring to New York City. Like people wanted to come and help and show up and support. Did you see that as well?
Oh yeah, just the people that donated their time, that worked in restaurants, that were feeding all the cops and firemen that were down there, that didn't work for the restaurant. They just came to help, and all the physical therapists that went to the hotels that would massaging cops and firemen, just volunteering their time and not getting paid. I met someone in a restaurant. She was working in the restaurant, and I still talk to her this day.
How about that?
Yeah. So yeah, there was tons of people that were just giving their time, just to help, just to do something.
How much did that help you and the other officers that you were with?
Oh, I think it helped immensely. Everyone loved us.
Yeah.
For the longest time after that. And then probably a year later, everyone hated us again. But yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, I'll never forget. I had one of the days I was down there, they gave me a scooter. It's like a little box scooter. The best way for me to explain it is like a cop in the box, it's called. So just imagine a scooter, but it's all covered.
Like the Pope Mobile?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a lot smaller than the Popemobile, but that's exactly what it is. You can only fit one person in there. It's a manual transmission, and it only goes like 35 miles an hour. It's usually a piece of shit. And I'll never forget, I was driving around down there, and I see these two girls. They called me over for something. I forgot what it was. And I was talking to them, and they needed to get somewhere else. And they thought they were right around the corner. I'm like, no, you're about 10 minutes away. So like, can you give us a ride? And I was like, I can't give you both a ride in this thing. I can barely fit in this thing. They're like, oh, let's try it. And I was like, all right, whatever. This will be fun. I squeezed them in to this thing. They're both like sitting on my lap practically. And I'm trying to drive, and I'm trying to think of the ways to get there where I'm not going to be seen. Because I'm like, if someone sees me with two people in this thing, I'm getting jammed up somehow. I'm getting in trouble. So I'm like, all right, I'm trying to plot this in my head as the two of them are just giggling in the stupid scooter. And I make this turn down this one street, and it's just wall-to-wall people trying to take pictures. And I was like, and people are screaming and cheering because I got these two girls in this thing. And I'm like, you got to get out of here. They're like, no, just take it. I mean, you got to get out. I'm going to get busted. And I threw them out, and everyone was just cheering and laughing when they got out. It was kind of funny. But yeah, that was one of the funnier moments being down there.
Which I'm sure was a welcome relief at the time.
Yeah, for sure. But just in general, the people were just more than willing to help, and it's for all the dummies that were thinking it was Disneyland and trying to take pictures like it was something so exciting. There was probably twice as many people that just wanted to help, just be there and do something.
Yeah,
so that was nice.
What changed about being a cop after that day? For you and for the department?
I don't really think much changed for the department. I mean, people loved this for like a little while, but then it went back to the normal. I mean, all it takes is for one cop to do something stupid, and everyone hates us again.
Right.
But for me, it just opened my eyes that I needed to get out of that place.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I ever really wanted to stay once I knew I was going to be retired, but that just cemented the fact that I was out of there. I wasn't staying.
Well, yeah, so bring me back. So you grow up in New York, born and raised in New York. You get to this point, you're standing for the Marriott Hotel that, okay, this place that I've spent my entire life, this, department that I'm going to do 20 years in, this is only a portion of my life, and then I get to do what I want with the rest of it. So if you were to look back and you say, okay, you got to retire by the age of 41.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to see a whole bunch of things in 9/11 that most of us never even want to think about seeing, never even want to know about what you saw. You lived in a city where there was this massive major terrorist attack. You know that this city is a target every day, and now there's war, so it's the threat levels up. So I bring all this up to say, okay, the 20 years, including the time with 9/11, to be able to be free as an adult by the age of 41, is it worth it?
100%. Totally worth it.
And maybe that's the trade-off, right? So the trade-off is You got to do some really difficult stuff. You're going to get shot at. You're going to get a brick thrown at you, a mattress frame thrown at you. Planes are going to fly into buildings. You're going to have to stand there for 6 weeks. But you'll be done at 41.
Yeah, it was totally worth it. I mean, I wouldn't do it now. I mean, if I was
do it now at your age or even at 21.
I was just about to say, as a 20-year-old now, I would probably be out of my mind to do it. In this climate, in this anti-police climate that we have, I think anyone that takes this job now has mental issues.
Which, that's a whole nother separate conversation about, when the pay is low, do you attract as quality a candidate? There's all these arguments that people make.
Well, the pay is always going to be low.
Yeah.
I mean, no one takes a job as a police officer saying, "Oh, I'm going to own $1 million home in 10 years."
Right.
No one does that. But going in that you're going to retire with a pension, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be worth it for you, right? I lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's totally worth it because you know that you're out. Right? You know you're out the door.
Well, and it's funny to think because I'm 45. So when you turned 45, you were retired for 4 years already, essentially. Like I can't even imagine like being retired right now. And you're like, yeah, you should because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is good.
So if you
go back to your last question because I don't remember. I kind of screwed up the answer.
Oh, it's totally fine. Just what changed about being a cop for you after 9/11, other than the fact that you knew you had an end window? You said, okay, right. I'm definitely done on my exact day, on my 20th day.
Well, actually, that's not true. I actually retired at 18 and a half years.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
But that ties into 9/11 in a way, right? Because
well, yeah,
the crime stats and the extra time that you put in.
Right. I accumulated so much time that I had 18 months vacation built up.
So so how does that work with the NYPD? So you were doing those 16-hour days, 18-hour days of crime stats. You get paid for 8, you get the rest in time.
Right. So like the way our overtime works is that you are only allowed to get 35 hours a month in cash.
Got it.
Anything over that has to be taken in time. So that's what I did. And the bosses that I had, a couple of bosses kind of fought me on it, but most of the bosses I had didn't care. They're like, as long as you're not, in the gym,
right,
when you're supposed to be working, I don't care what you do. If you want to accumulate that time and you're sitting at your desk, do whatever you want. Because they didn't care, because no one cared about time then. No one cared. It was fine. And so I just stayed. I mean, if I wasn't doing anything, I stayed at work.
Yeah. Like I have no plans tonight. I'll just do some extra work.
If they needed me, I was there. So I just built up all those hours.
And that was part of your plan. So you're standing in front of the Marriott and you said, okay, how can I do this? And then you start implementing your plan.
That was part of the plan for sure. And I didn't think it was doable. I would have been happy with 6 months. But, because I'm so obsessive and I realized that, oh my God, this is going to work. I'm like, I'm going to do a year. And then I realized a year ago, it's be nothing. I'm going to do another 6 months. And I that's what I did. But, technically, when you're on vacation, you're not supposed to be able to work overtime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's a big no-no. But where I worked, I was able to do that. And I worked with a guy. I got to give him a shout. His name is Pat Cosgrave. He hooked me up big time. And the bosses knew what I was doing. Like, they didn't care. Yeah, you're not supposed to work, but what's the big deal, right? He's just trying to get his pension in order. But because of guys like me, you can't do that anymore. They cap you at time. You're not allowed to work all that time anymore. So,
well, you would think too that if you're a cop, you kind of understand that retirement's the goal. Get the pension, do
right,
the time.
And everyone does. Everyone knows that.
And then, of course, the city, though, is like, wait a second here. You, officer, you can't do this, so we're going to change all the policies.
Yeah, well, because, people started exploiting it.
Yep.
I mean, believe me, I wasn't the first person that thought of it. But,
by the book.
When everyone starts doing it, they realize they got a problem.
They got to change the rules.
Yeah.
Change the book. So when you think about the latter part of your career, the post 9/11 part of your career, how would you sum that up? Was it focused, get the job done, work as much as possible? Was it, I don't want to go back out on the street ever again? Was it?
Well, like we spoke about the last time, no one wants to go out on the street. Nobody. If you want to, then you have some kind of issue. Like you have some kind of issue where you want to just be out there and running around like a lunatic all day long. Nobody wants to go out on the street. My goal was to work as much overtime as I could, which I always did. And that became the challenge of my pension because I worked so much for so long that for me to maximize my pension at the end, I had to work like even more than I did all the time, which was hard. So, I mean, my last 2 years, I did nothing but work. So after 9/11, my goal was to just get my job done. You know, we'd go out on the street and do these dopey, you know, these initiatives that they would have and, you know, look for people to arrest and, you know, write 250s on, stop and frisk and stuff. But my goal was to just get to work, get my paperwork done, get my ComStat stuff done, you know, work as much overtime as I could. You know, that mean, you know, no one really goes out on the street. I mean, you know, they would, you know, they had the all-out nonsense. They wanted the people that the behind desk to go out and do patrol because they, you know, they're forgetting what it's like and they need all this extra personnel on the street, which is just, you know, just nonsense.
So was in looking back at kind of the 9/11 backdrop on that motivation, what is the point where you knew you could do it? So you're like, all right, this is going to happen.
Probably, I would say 3 or 4 years later. Because I had a boss that wouldn't allow me to do the time. And I was like, all right, this isn't going to work. You know, like, okay, whatever. I'll just suck it up. If this is the way it's got to be, it's going to be. And then she left. And then I got another boss, and she was like, and, you know, she hated the one that wouldn't give me the time overtime. Like, they didn't get along. They hated one another. So I think, actually, she let me do what I wanted to just to spite the other one.
Right place, right time. That's okay.
Women NYPD in a nutshell. So she just let me do whatever I wanted. And I was like, I can pull this off. Like, I think I can pull this off if I can do it. And like, I know I did the math in my head and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do every month, every year, blah, blah, blah. And I would probably say that 4th year, after probably like 2005 is when I realized that I can probably get it done.
How'd you keep the discipline to work all those shifts knowing that the end goal was in mind? Because I think this is a great lesson for really anyone to be able to say, okay, I have a plan, I have a goal, and I know how to get to the goal because I've done the math. So now I have a strategy, but the strategy requires you to stay so disciplined.
Because I'm obsessive and there's something wrong with me.
Obsessive, yes. Not so much sure on the latter part there.
Because you know me better than anyone. When I have something in my head, I'm going to get it done.
Yep.
So, and that was it. And it was possible. So I did it. And believe me, like I wasn't one of those guys that woke up with a hangover and I was like, oh, I'm calling out sick. No, I just went to work.
Yep.
I just did it because I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. I might as well just go to work, suffer, and then not waste a day off.
I remember when I came up, it was after Hurricane Katrina. So I come up, because, I'm looking for a job, and I think I stayed with you for like 2 weeks. And we would stay up till ridiculous hours, and you would get up at like 4:30 and go to work, and you would just do it. And we'd be like, all right, I'm going to stay up till 11 again tonight and get up at 4:30 and go to work. And then we'll stay up till midnight the next night. I'll still get up and go to work. But now you don't have to do that because you did that for so long.
Yep.
So what was it like at the end? So you have your plan, you carry it out, you know you can retire. What was that like?
Glorious. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had a lot of stress in my last year because I had a goal that with my overtime, and you're not allowed to make over 20% overtime from the year before, right? So
of your salary.
So if my 19th year I made 600 hours overtime, let's say, well, let's just make a round number, easy number. If I made 500 hours on my 19th year, I can't go over 20% in my 20th year, meaning I can't do more than 600 hours, right? Or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a challenge because I worked so much overtime. So I had it in my head what I needed to do. So the payroll person, who I will love to the day I die.
She's a saint.
Her name was Maria. She was an old Italian woman. She loved me. So when you work overtime, you're supposed to hand in your overtime slip the same day so they can keep track of it. So Maria would take all my overtime slips and she just put them in her drawer. She just put them away in her desk somewhere. And then at the end of the month, she'd all hand them in. So, and when my 35 hours turned into 150 hours, people would lose their minds. So, because I needed her to do that because I needed to have a certain amount of hours in place to maximize my pension. So, the first month of my first year of overtime was May, and I did 80 hours.
Okay.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
10 shifts.
It's not ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? But it's still well over 35. That raised a few eyebrows, but no one cared. For June, I did 150 hours in June. People went crazy. They lost their shit. So now I was like on double secret probation. So for the first 2 months of July, they gave me nothing. I got nothing in the first 2 months of July because they were so angry. So then I think in July, I only ended up with 30. So I'm like, oh, I'm screwed, right? So Marie was like, don't worry, you'll be fine. She just didn't care. And because the best part about me being on vacation and not going into the office every day is that no one knew what I was doing. I took my uniform home. I never went into the office. I had my own radio. All I needed to do was switch out the battery. So no one had any clue what I was doing.
Where's Rob? Somewhere in this city.
But the story gets even better because one of the big bosses found out what I was doing, and he was like, he's not allowed to do this while he's on vacation. He has to come back to work for 4 hours a day. So he technically has to work 4 hours a day or else he can't work the overtime. So I knew they were just fucking with me.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought they were going to break me, which was their mistake. Because I knew that they're trying to fuck with me. So now I was going to go out of my way to do exactly what they didn't think I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to imagine, all my time was accounted for. I was running all my vacation time at this point.
Yeah, so you would basically work your 20-year commitment through your hours, because 20 years, 40 hours a week, whatever it is.
And all that vacation time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So every time they made me go back to work, it was 4 hours and 30. Every time they made me go back to work for 4 hours and 30 minutes, they were just adding to the time that I already had. It's like, and I explained to my boss who had to break this to me, and I was like, don't they understand that if I retire, right now, if I retire, I have no vacation time left. If they make me come back and work 4.5 hours every day, I'm going to have all those 4.5 hours built up when I retire, and they're going to have to pay me for it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, they don't care. They want to break you. And I'm like, all right, I can play this game. So starting in July, when they made me go back, when they started making me do overtime, I had to go back to work for 4.5 hours a day. And my position was already filled, so I didn't do anything. I just sat at a desk and just stare at the walls for 4.5 hours. I'm like, all right.
See you later.
Big gulps, huh? And I just left. I didn't do anything. I was useless.
That's amazing.
I didn't do anything because they thought they were going to break me.
Yep.
So fast forward, when I retired, I had so much hours that they made me work that they had to cut me a check for $16,000. So not only did I get the overtime, they gave me another $16,000.
Management. Gotta love them. Fascinating. So where did all this overtime come from? Because that's a lot of overtime. That's a lot of shifts.
Most of it was this. We talked about this the last time. Most of it was what was called, I can't remember what it was called. CRV, I think it was called. I don't remember. But it was basically, the whole thing started about that guy that threw that makeshift bomb at the Marine Recruitment Center.
This is in Times Square.
Times Square, right across the street from where they drop the ball every New Year's. It's right across the street from there. And that blossomed into this whole ridiculous initiative that every synagogue had to be covered. Every, foreign diplomat building had to be covered. High sensitive location, like everything had to be covered at all hours of the day. So it was the greatest thing ever because nobody wants to do it at 3:00 in the morning. But I did.
For Rob Coppola.
Because it was the only thing I could really do. So I did that probably 4 days a week. And then on the weekend, I would do the normal parade, barriers, whatever. So that's how I did it. And like I said, my friend Pat hooked me up. And the biggest challenge was you couldn't do it by yourself. You had to work with someone. And nobody wants to do it in February at 3:00 in the morning.
That's true.
So I would have to beg people to work with me. I mean, I had to bribe people to work with me basically because I couldn't find anyone to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I got it done. And I still speak to people this day. My friend Vivian, she lives in upstate New York. My friend Zoraida, she lives in Florida. They did the most work with me because they just didn't care because they wanted the money too, and they were great.
And is that the best part about the NYPD? We talked about this last time as well. Is the fact that for the most part it is we'll call it a brotherhood, even though there were women in it, of course.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's the best part about the job by far. The people that you meet and the friends that you make and the camaraderie you have with them. That's the best thing by far,
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'll be friends with these people till the day I die.
Oh yeah. Cop bond for sure.
And the stories, I'm sure there's a lot of stories about me that people tell, especially with the overtime, but
probably an admiration for being able, willing, and having the balls to pull it off.
Yeah. Well, I still speak to people. I went back to New York in September and I spoke to a couple of guys that I worked with and they're like, "You're a legend. Like you're a freaking legend." Because people hate you because they can't do it anymore.
Right.
But
so what advice would you give to people who have a goal like you did to be able to stand there at 3:00 in the morning? Because that's what people always ask me, like, "Oh, how'd you do the radio thing?" I'm like, basically it was a willingness to do what other people weren't willing to do. And that opens more doors than you could possibly imagine.
I think it's just a mindset. Like that's the way I grew up. Like my dad, he always told me, I remember once after a Little League game, I had a bad game and I'll never forget. He told me, he goes, you might not be the best on the field, but you better be the hardest worker on the field. And that stuck with me. And I do it to this day. I go to the gym for 3 hours a freaking day.
I know. You are a few years older than me, and I can't keep up with you.
So, I mean, it's just the way it's always been. It's like I just put my mind to it, and I just refuse to quit.
Yeah. What would you encourage people to think about a cop? So if you see a cop, what do you want people to think about? It's
so bad now. It's so different. I mean, 12 years doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of shit's happened in 12 years to policing. And I don't know. I mean, it's so tough. Like every cop, of course, is just a normal person, right? It's just like you and me.
Yep.
Or just like the guy that delivers your mail or the Amazon driver. It's a job, but it's just the nonsense that they have to deal with day in and day out just wears on you. And, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, respect every cop you see. But you can't because a lot of cops are dicks, right? And they don't deserve their respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them don't give it. So why should they get it? And I think nowadays it's just everyone's on pins and needles, right? Like they can't do their job effectively. Without being second guessed. Everyone's got a camera. Everyone's watching you. Everyone's waiting for you to screw up. And I think it's so different now. I can't imagine. Like, I don't know. I know I couldn't do it. So it's tough. I don't know what I would say to people. I mean, like we spoke about the last time, as you know, as long as the cop's not telling you to do something completely stupid and ridiculous, just follow directions.
Be nice. Follow directions.
Be nice, follow directions, and you'll most likely drive home without a ticket or getting beat over the head.
And that's kind of it. And in a lot of those things, right, there's so many different nuances, but for most of us, it's just try to be a good person. It'll be okay. Especially as a cop, being good people to other people. It's how you build relationships. It's how things get done.
Right. And we spoke about this the last time too. 98% of any person in any position doesn't go out that day and like, you know what? I'm really going to fuck up today. I'm really going to do something stupid and beat up someone or shoot somebody for no reason. No one says that.
Right.
Of course, you have a bad day, you have a fight with your wife, you find out your wife's cheating on you or some stupid thing or whatever, your kid breaks your favorite TV or whatever. Like, so you go to work in a bad mood. So yeah, maybe something might happen that sets you off, but not everyone wakes up that morning wanting to do something stupid. So, you know, if you're getting pulled over, you don't start driving 80 miles an hour, right? You just pull over.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you get pulled over, you don't come out of the car screaming like an idiot, you know, because again, that's just going to elevate everything. And now you don't know, like, just like you don't know who you're pulling over, you don't know who's pulling you over.
Right. It's true. So next time, I would love more cop stories.
Ugh.
I know you have some good ones. So I just want to, if you're willing, to kind of run through some of the highlights of your career, because nothing better than a cop story.
Yeah. Well, I told a few of them
Yep.
last time.
There's so many more, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I had so much fun. Like Steve and I, it was almost impossible, the stupid things that would happen to Steve and I. Between the naked people, the naked emotionally disturbed people that were running around, the squirrel, there's a squirrel story that's a really, really good one that I'll tell next time. And then unfortunately they used to call us like the emergence of death, Steve and I, because at least for maybe, I don't know, 5-6 weeks in a row, we used to have an accident where someone died.
Wow.
It was always our job. It was always ours. Like we'd always get stuck with it. As soon as we would hear it, we were like, how is this happening again?
Well, I guess it would desensitize you to accidents in a way.
Oh, yeah. But the stupidest one, I'll tell this story. The stupidest one we had was an old man was crossing the street and he kind of like walked into a car. So the car had made a turn, and after the car made a turn, it drove like maybe 20 feet, and this old man walked into the car. He fell and hit his head on a parked car. Falls down, conscious. We get there. He's fine. He's talking to us. He forgot his wallet. He just had some money in his pocket. He was going to buy something. Because he had a head injury, they take you to a certain hospital. So the head trauma hospital was in Staten Island, which is 30 minutes away. He leaves. We're just cleaning up the scene, whatever. There's no reason to have a scene because it was really nothing, right? You know, we're just finishing up the paperwork, but we have to go now to the hospital to ID this guy and, you know, find someone that, you know, find a family member. We get in the car. We drive 2 minutes. We get a notification that the guy dies on his way to the hospital. They tell us to turn around and go back and create a crime scene. We're like, what crime scene? There's no crime scene. He was conscious. He was alive. So we're literally on the bridge going into Staten Island. They make us turn around, go back into Brooklyn. We had to set up a crime scene of nothing.
No cones, no like.
No, we had to rope off the area, but there's nothing there. People are like, what's happening? We're like, nothing.
Nothing.
Like, why are you roping it off? Oh, someone died. Where? He's not here anymore.
Right here, yes.
But what happened? It was just the stupidest thing I ever heard. So now we have to wait for like all the units to come, and they have an accident investigation unit that actually comes to investigate it. And they come and we're explaining to them. They're like, well, why are we here? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why we're here.
Because I was told to be here.
So for 4 hours, we had to sit there.
Wow.
Of course, we have to wait for the AIS, because AIS is a citywide unit. So sometimes it takes them a while to get there. So we had to wait for AIS to show up, and, they got the measuring tape, and they're measuring all this stuff, and I'm trying to remember things like where he hit his head and where the cars, because now nothing's the same.
Of course.
It was just so stupid.
What do you do for 4 hours while you stand in a crime scene?
Oh, you just talk to people.
Yeah.
Make up stories. What happened? Just.
Because everyone's curious.
Yeah. Someone died here. A car accident. Oh, yeah. What happened? He fell. He fell? He was fine. What do you mean he was fine? But now he's dead. What?
He's fine, and now he's not. Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Yeah. So those are stories too. Like I was just telling my girlfriend those stories. When we used to go to these demonstrations in the city, we used to make up the most ridiculous stories as to why people were demonstrating. Like, what's going on? Why are people demonstrating? So one of my favorite ones was, I don't think I was with Steve, but I told people that, because back in the day when you would go bowling, right?
Oh, yeah.
You'd go bowling, the pins were picked up by people, not the machines. Like, people used to pick it up. So I told them that this guy worked in a bowling alley, and they were moving over to the machines, but he was still trying to whatever. And this guy got maimed and lost an arm in the bowling alley. And people were demonstrating because they weren't paying for his insurance and his medical bills. And people believed it.
Of course.
They just believe everything.
You should have been a creative writer.
Really? They're like, wow. There's that many people demonstrating for that?
You're a
I'm
cop.
like, yeah.
You would never lie to somebody. You have a badge on.
Well, those are my funny things too. Like, working in Manhattan so much, people from Idaho would be like, where's the Sunflower Hotel? I don't know.
Yes.
What do you mean you don't know? You're a cop here.
9,000 hotels.
There's literally over 800 hotels within like a 5-mile radius. How do I know where this hotel
Exactly.
is?
Call the number and ask him to direct you.
No, that would be it. I take out my phone and Google it.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yep. Go out there, take a right, take a left.
But two couples come up to us and they're like, hey, this was, let's see, probably 2009, maybe 2008, 2009. Couple comes up to us and says, do you know where that famous transgender bar is in Greenwich Village? Now, transgender was like no one knew anything about transgender people in 2008, 2009, right? So they're asking me this, and I'm like, first of all, why would I know this?
Yeah.
How would I know where the famous transgender bar is?
Because you live in New York, you're supposed to know where everything in New York is, and you're a cop.
So it got to the point, like, when people would ask us these ridiculous questions, we would just make it linger forever and just screw with these people.
So that's the best advice. Don't ask a cop a question about where something is.
Well, especially now. You got a phone. Look at your phone. Go to Google. There you go. That's how we're going to end today's story.
I love it. So we'll have more stories with Rob. Thank you for sharing today. I know we touched on some sensitive things, but I just think that that's important for us to be able to understand what it was like being a cop around those days. So thank you for shedding some light on that.
You're welcome.
And finding that balance, too, of, I think this is where we'll go with the stories, is there's the tough parts about the job, but then there's the stories that bring life to the job.
Yep. There's always stories.
Until next time. Thanks, Rob.
Absolutely fantastic, stunning stories. Rob has also agreed to let you ask him questions for our next visit. We have it on the calendar, but need your questions. So what question would you ask a cop to get an unfiltered answer? Doesn't matter what it is. Shoot it over to me at rob@equalmatters.com. I will consider it for a future episode with Rob. And if you want to find me on social, you can. Just look for Rob Hunter Media on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also DM me there. But again, my email, rob@equalmatters.com. Don't forget to send those questions. What do you want to ask a cop? Also, don't forget to check out my communication and performance course that's going to help you utilize radio broadcasting skills to sharpen your points and stand out. Check the show notes. And I'd love to coach you as well. What goals are you chasing? Let me know. Let's schedule a free 20-minute call and we can discuss more. So don't forget, make it easy. Subscribe to Equal Matters to get that episode as soon as it's ready. Thanks again for being here. Equal matters. Conversation is where we are equal. It matters when we listen. Please share this podcast with your friends who might enjoy it. I'm Rob Hunter. Good night.